God, everyone got quiet. What's going on? I know. Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? This is a lively crowd. So, my name is Sean Frederick Forbes. I am the director of the Creative Writing Program at the University of Connecticut, and welcome to the Aetna Celebration of Creative Nonfiction. Before I introduce our readers for this evening, I'd like to thank the Aetna Chair of Writing, Brenda Brueggerman, who will be here shortly, the Associate Director of Creative Writing, Ellen Littman, who is over there. Ellen. The Graduate Assistant Director of Creative Writing, Sophie Buckner, who's over there. And I thank them for all of their work for this event, especially Sophie, who did incredible work getting all of you out here tonight. And I'd also like to thank the ASL interpreters for being here this evening with us. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Aetna Chair of Writing, the Barnes & Noble Bookstore, and the Creative Writing Program. The Aetna Celebration of Creative Nonfiction began in the early 2000s by the former Aetna Chair of Writing and Professor Emerita of English, Lynn Z. Bloom, and it honors a literary master whose work has shaped the essay canon. It also recognizes the student winner of our annual creative nonfiction essay contest. The Aetna Celebration of Creative Nonfiction is a festive occasion for the university community to celebrate both an established presence and emerging voices in the genre. Past writers include Katie Booth, Stephen Cusisto, Emily Rapp Black, M.T. Anderson, Ginger Strand, Rigoberto Gonzalez, and Alyssa Washuda. And tonight, our featured reader is the UConn English Department's very own Dr. Gina Barreca. Gina and I are from New York, she's from Brooklyn, I'm from Queens, so whenever we get together, the accents come out, right? So, the winner of the 2023-2024 Aetna Creative Nonfiction Award is undergraduate Gabrielle Wincherhorn. She's a sophomore. She is a sophomore majoring in ecology and evolutionary biology with a minor in psychology. As a kid, they wanted to be an author when they grew up. As an ex-kid, she still enjoys writing. She also loves birds, languages, animation, and music. Gabrielle is currently the president of UConn's Creative Writing Club. She will be reading an excerpt from her prize-winning essay titled Little Loves. Gabrielle, would you please come to the stage?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Oh,
yeah. Pull it down even more.
Okay, good, because I'm not tall. Okay, do I just go right into it? Okay. This is from like the middle of the piece, so it kind of sounds out of context, but it's okay, we'll ease into it. In evolutionary biology, they talk about how fossils become embedded in rock layers and then buried underneath new rock layers. But the fossils are still there. All you have to do is dig. Layer after layer, day after day stacks on top of you. You feel like an outdated rock layer, too quick to grow around certain people, and then they go ahead and rip their fossils out of you, because they were never dead, they were alive, and they were always going to leave. New layers grow in over the old, sure, until they're all out of sight, but you've still got the imprints. You are the ginkgo tree, adapted to circumstances that were ripped away from you in a heartbeat. Still you struggle to change. Still you can feel the imprint of their fossils in you, even when you last knew them layers and layers ago. You don't know how to reshape yourself without them. It's 3 a.m. and you're crying because you miss everyone you don't see anymore, and because where other people settle into their interests and little loves, you bury pieces of yourself and people, and you come apart when they leave you. Who are you if even the people you love choose to leave you? You think about this over and over, and once again, you let your mind devour you alive. So there, you're shot at love or something. You don't think you were actually in love with him, but how are you to know? Being together didn't save him, and it didn't save you. At least now you know what you were missing, you suppose. Now it's just the who you're missing, and you'd give a lot to have him back, but whatever. Maybe relationships just aren't for you. You're done with love or anything even resembling it. For a while, at least. No fairy tale ending for you. That kind of love is no hero. But by now, you know it's not just that kind of love that hangs around. Maybe you can get your happy ending some other way. Maybe it's not too late for love to still save you. And afterwards, you stop trying so hard to claw out scraps of love for yourself from barren deserts. You stop going to church. Your youth pastor stops coming to see you. You guess without going to church, you're not good enough for him to visit you anymore. It's probably not true. He has other priorities now, that's all. But it's hard not to feel that way when you see him posting photos on Instagram of other youth group graduates he visits, and not you. So it goes. You get used to living without trying to wring love out from wherever you can. But you find it in small pieces, in unexpected ways. You have a sleepover with some high school friends at a beach house over the summer and stay up until 3 a.m. talking about religion and love and anything, everything else. You go to bed with your own bedroom for the first time, and you get maybe 4 hours of sleep, but wake up in the morning feeling so lucky to be near the ocean and to be with friends. You find yourself less tolerant of the lack of love you'd been given before. Your home becomes increasingly more suffocating. One night, you argue with your sister, and neither of you talk to the other for 2 weeks. You finally do, outside on the deck, surrounded by blinking fireflies and also mosquitoes, and it's through talking with her that you realize your home has never been home. Then again, nowhere really has. Seahorse you. You are the heir to a fallen dynasty, kingdoms that no longer exist. You have nowhere to go. Other people live in the world, you merely exist in it. Other people are from the world, you're just of it. But you keep at it. What else can you do? You change strategies, dig your feet into the sand rather than keep drifting, and somehow you still manage to float just on the outside of everything. All the while, you marvel at the little loves all the people around you carry. Leo rambles on about stars and trees and records. Stormy loves sharks and Star Wars. Victor laughs unrestrainedly, unashamedly, letting it take over him completely, stopping on the stairwell and hunching over and leaning against the wall. They are all wonderful and lovely in the bits of beauty they carry around with them. You've got nothing, nothing to anchor you, just half-baked ideas and half-abandoned interests, and a cloud of hopelessness that hanging over your head that gets heavier every day. But it's good to know other people are different. Maybe one day, you can be like them.
Gabrielle, thank you so much. Now it is my honor to introduce Gina Barreca. Gina Barreca has appeared often as a repeat guest on 2020, The Today Show, CNN, the BBC, NPR, and yes, on Oprah to discuss gender, power, politics, and humor. Her earlier books include the best-selling They Used to Call Me Snow White, But I Drifted, Women's Strategic Use of Humor, It's Not That I'm Bitter, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying About Visible Panty Lines and Conquered the World, love that title, and Babes in Boyland, another incredible title, A Personal History of Co-Education in the Ivy League. Her latest books are part of a series she's editing on fast women for Connecticut-based Woodhall Press. These include Fast Funny Women, 75 essays of Flash Nonfiction that was published in 2021, Fast Fierce Women, which was published in 2022, and Fast Fallen Women, published in 2023. Of the other 7 books she's written or co-authored, several have been translated into other languages, including Chinese, Spanish, Japanese, Portuguese, and German. Called Smart and Funny by People magazine, and Very, Very Funny for a Woman by Dave Barry, Gina was deemed a feminist humor maven by Miss Magazine. Novelist Wally Lamb said, Barreca's prose in equal measures is hilarious and humane. Her work has appeared in most major publications, including the New York Times, the Independent of London, the Chronicle of Higher Education, Cosmopolitan, and the Harvard Business Review. Her blog, For Psychology Today, has well over 7.5 million views. She's the Board of Trustees Distinguished Professor of English at the University of Connecticut, and she's also the winner of UConn's highest award for excellence in teaching. Please help me welcome Gina Barreca to the stage.
Thank you for being here. I feel like most of the people in the audience I know, and a lot of you I owe money to. So I'll give you the 5 after we're done, but really thank you for coming. It's a cold night. When Sean first asked me to do this, or when the invitation came, I was picturing like a warm spring evening right before spring break, and of course the wind is blowing outside, and we're still deep in winter and whatever. So life's expectations don't always match what we imagined when we first signed up for them. But I'm absolutely honored to be the Aetna reader. Brenda was thanked by Sean before she got here, so Brenda, thank you for making the, let's get another round of applause for Brenda. And another round of applause for Gabriel, who did such a really beautiful job. And I'm not that I'm taking all the credit in the world, but I was one of the readers for Gabriel's essay, and I remember being profoundly moved by her use of the analogies, the deft use of the fossils, and the idea that people bury parts of themselves in you that they can then take away, and the thought then that you have to find other bits of yourself that have to replace those absences, and where do you look for them, and how do you get them. And it was such, I have a few of my creative writing students here tonight, and former creative writing students, and it's one of the things that we discuss in class is how do you find the right analogy? How do you find a way to express what you're thinking and the emotions that we all feel, that as soon as you come up with the analogy, you think, oh, that's absolutely it. And how come nobody has ever talked that way about this feeling before, so that it's both original and incredibly familiar as soon as you get to it. And for me, that's one of the biggest parts about knowing that you're hitting the right spot in terms of your writing. You come up with a way to describe it, and somebody just says, of course that's it. How come we haven't been talking in these terms the whole time? So as everybody here, I think maybe there are 6 people I haven't met before, but everybody else knows that I've spent a very long time writing about women and humor, and gender and humor, and the fact that men and women laugh at different things. Not always and not on all occasions, and those things may be changing. I have been at the University of Connecticut since the Earth's crust cooled. Since 1987. Deb Shabbat is here, who sold me my house in 1990. My husband and I moved into our house in 1991, January 1st of 1991. The audience is divided into people who are still listening to music from 1991 and have those as the newer songs on their playlist, and people who were, and I've seen people, I'm recognizing people I haven't seen before, and people who just, again, 1991 is now retro, and they're dressing up as people from 91 for like a party. Oh, it's a 90s party. And I'm thinking, I remain one of the better dressed women from the 1990s. That's the outfits that I'm going in. And they're like wearing it as a costume. And so it goes. That's how things work. And I'm not bitter, despite the title to the book. And I learned about gender difference in humor growing up in Brooklyn, New York. Again, no one has ever mistaken me for someone who grew up in Connecticut. In 37 years, no one has ever come up and said, oh, Professor Barreca, what part of Connecticut do you come from? Because I still sound like I'm from New York. And when I first moved to Connecticut, I tried to pass for about, the first semester. So I tried to say aunt instead of aunt, and I couldn't carry it off. I couldn't do it. And in the middle of a real discussion, in the course, I'd be saying, yeah, my aunts, brought me up on Ocean Avenue, and the kids were like, is this the same part? Was she drinking then, or is she drinking now? We can't figure out which is the real accent, and I just thought, okay, this is it. As soon as I got tenure, I stopped trying to fake the accent at all, and that's what tenure is for. And I can write that. I have written about that, actually, in the Chronicle of Higher Education. And one of the great things, there are a couple of people here. Medea is here, one of my former students who graduated from the University of Southern California with a degree in film, script writing. And Jerome Daly, who's now teaching at UConn. It's a poet in the back of the room, and there are students who will become people who come back and lecture, who are in the classes now. But the last few volumes that Sean mentioned that I've been doing for Woodhull Press, which is run by a former student of mine. He came up with the concept for the press and made it happen with two other young men that he knew, and now it's an established and real press that are getting manuscripts from real agents in New York and turning people down. And Dave Legere came up and said, I keep in touch with my former students. Once you're a student, you're always a student, and it sort of continues the relationship. And he said, would you consider doing something about women in humor for our press? And I said, absolutely, I'd love to do that. But he remembered the stories about my growing up in New York, where, again, I learned about gender difference in humor because as I was raised, my mother died when I was a kid, and I was raised by my Italian aunts. And my Italian aunts were all about 3'2". And they all weighed about 750 pounds, okay? And they all wore floral print dresses at all times, unless it was a wedding or a funeral, in which case they wore black. But that was it. That was the formal wear. And but otherwise they were in these classic, floral outfits and with an apron. And it looked, if you had them all scattered around the basement kitchen, which is where the cooking was done, there were two kitchens. There was an upstairs kitchen that nobody ever used because it was too nice for anyone that we knew to be cooked for. You ever grow up, near Italians? Yeah, and there was the basement kitchen, and that's where the action was. There was the upstairs kitchen where a meal could be cooked for, like, if the Pope came. You could cook for the Pope in that kitchen, and he'd be allowed to sit in the living room that otherwise people couldn't go into because there was one room where the furniture matched and was covered in industrial grade vinyl that was like 2 inches thick, and if you sat on it, in shorts in the summer, they had to get you up with a spatula. I mean, it was just like a skin graft onto the vinyl, and the lamps were covered in cellophane, right? Because they wanted to keep the lampshades nice, because that was an inheritance. That's what you would inherit, was like the lamp with a base shaped like an elephant, right? So they would keep the cellophane. And I remember, like, in second grade, learning that light makes heat. And going to my grandmother, my Sicilian grandmother, who was shorter than her daughter. So she was like knee high, really, my grandmother. And I'd come over from the boat from outside Palermo. And I said, Grandma, I learned that light makes heat, and that it could cause like a fire. There could be something incendiary. It was like a new word. Remember when you were a kid and you learned a new word and you wanted to use it? And it was like it could be something incendiary. And she grabbed my ear, which was very hard for her to do because I was already but she grabbed my ear and she said, "You go into the living room, you turn the light on." And I was like, no, I never did that. It was all theoretical, Grandma. It was fine. No one would ever turn the light on. And but it was in that basement kitchen that I learned about gender difference in humor. Because the men were always very loud and very boisterous and very funny, and the women smiled and nodded, okay? And I still find that that's true in a lot of situations. Women smile and nod. We go like this. And we do what I call the silver bell tinkling laughter around men. And this continues. I see my students doing it now. It's not like this has gone into the past. where young women and women my age, I'm 67, which most people know, again, because I introduce myself as, hi, I'm Gina Barreca, I'm a young child of 67, just go up and tell them, and I weigh 154 pounds. Those are the only two things anybody in the audience needs to know to place me in context. So that's it. You don't have to guess my weight or age like at a state fair where you win something. So that's the idea. You don't have to figure anything out. And so they would, that was enough, you have to train. I understand. It's like after that, it's like, she's making this up as she goes along, how are we following her? And so the men were very loud and very boisterous, but the women in the family would smile and nod at whatever the men had to say, even if they really disagreed with it. And I still see the young women that I see today often are smiling and nodding or doing the silver bell tinkling laughter. Do you know that sound? No, silver bell tinkling laughter. Maybe it's gone, maybe it really has gone the way of go-go boots, which I'm almost wearing tonight. But that silver bell tinkling laughter goes something like, you ever heard that noise? You ever hear women make that? Oh, that's so funny. No woman has ever made that noise when she's having a good time. That is not the noise that women make when we're laughing. We don't do that. Women, when we're really laughing at something, we don't go, we go, that's really funny. And we start going like that, and we do the mascara. Rubbing behavior, and even women wise enough not to wear mascara do this. It's like an atavistic response. It's in our junk DNA. It goes so far back that we just do that. After a certain age, over a certain weight, bust holding behavior, going like this. There are women going like this, right? And then finally, how do you know where women are really having a good time? We go, don't make me pee in my pants. I love when there's a signer doing that. The first time I did this in a big auditorium where somebody was signing, and I saw my signer go like, do that for don't make me pee in my pants. And it was the gesture I thought I should have somebody next to me explaining this the whole time. Don't make me pee in my pants. It was wonderful. It was great. And so that's what women do. What we don't, it's a different noise, but we learn to fake it at an early age. Men laugh at what they think is funny. Men don't look around going, is that funny? Are we laughing? Are we laughing? They laugh or they don't laugh. Women still look around the room going, is this funny? Are we laughing? We're laughing. Okay, good, we're laughing. Now we're laughing. Here we go. We're waiting for the laugh track because women are still looking around for sort of permission to express what we're feeling, no matter what we've got inside. So that's why I've spent my time looking at this. So when I was growing up, the basement kitchen is where the real action was. So the little old lady aunts were there. They were like 36, but they, I'm 12, so they're little old ladies. And they're in the basement kitchen, and there is no one more adored than a man in an Italian family. They're all princes, and they're kings, and they're whatever. And that's true except for men in a Jewish family, who are kings and princes, and men in a Puerto Rican family who are kings and princes, and men in a Taiwanese family who are, you getting the pattern in terms of this? And so the women, though, it didn't mean that they weren't making fun or laughing. They just did it on the side, right? They were doing it in the kitchen. So that my Aunt Rose would go to my Aunt Josephine, Josie, let's tell Tony, their brother Tony, let's tell Tony that I got the pork chops at the butcher he doesn't like. I got them at the butcher he likes, but let's tell him I got them at the butcher he doesn't like. Let's see what he does. It was like men were a chemistry experiment. That were like, let's see what he does for this. So there go, and we would sit at these refectory tables. There were not individual chairs. The immediate family was 117. They all came for Sunday lunch, and so they and let's say the credenza where the cutlery was right here, and we'd be sitting here, but no man in my family once he sat down for a Sunday meal, ever got up again. Right? That didn't happen. So that he sat down, and if, let's say, he was missing a fork, Uncle Tony would go, "Girls, I don't have a fork." And 16 women would go, "Oh my God, Tony doesn't have a fork. Who set the table? Your uncle works hard all day. He works all week. He puts food on the table. Who do you think paid for the lamp chop? Who do you think is doing that? Put a fork." Tony could have gone like this and gotten a fork, but he didn't do that because it was not his job. So he's sitting there. So there's Tony with all this authority and heft. And the women, though, Josie and Rosie would come up and go, "Tony, this week it was the kids' first communion. It was so busy at school. There was a play. We had to do this. I had to go to the butcher on the corner. I didn't get to go to the butcher in the avenue. And I know with your fine palate," and the women are looking at each other, but absolutely straight-faced. They're looking at each other, "With your fine palate, Tony, that you can tell the difference. So I just want to let you know about the meat that I didn't." And Tony, with the gravitas of like Juan Valdez tasting the coffee, some of you will know what that means. It would be like the coffee taster. He would take a bite and go, no, it's good. It's good. It's not the same, but it's good. And the women wouldn't have said, "Well, next week I promise I'll go to the butcher, the really good butcher." And then absolutely just wide-eyed and like this. And the women would then go in the basement and go, "Did you see him? Did you see him fall for that? It's the same butcher. He thinks he knows it's the same butcher. He can't." So there was a very big gender divide in terms of how that worked. And I thought, okay, so women laugh. That's why there was always laughter coming out of the ladies' room. Right? There's laughter coming out of the ladies' room. Women go into the toilets together. And there are intimate discussions. Women's discussions start with intimacy and end with the exchange of details. Okay? Women go into the bathroom and somebody says, "I have a headache." And first of all, women open their bags and go, "Okay, I have aspirin, I have Aleve, I have Advil. Is it allergy related? I have Sudafed. I have, my sister-in-law is a nurse. I have samples. We are giving the stuff away." And then another woman comes in and says, "Oh, but a headache, what's going on in your life?" And she says, "My oldest kid, it's really a problem." And going, "How old is the oldest?" And it's going, "The oldest is 38 at this point, and I don't know what I'm going to do." And somebody else is, and we're exchanging these details about our intimate lives. Men, my husband Michael, who's out having pizza tonight, he's not here. He's out, he has pizza with these guys every month. And he comes back and says, "Marvin's wife is having triplets." And I was like, "I didn't even know Marvin was married. What do you mean she's having triplets?" I said, "Are they doing IVF? Because she's 53. And I said, "So is she having triplets? Is she 53? And he goes, "Well, how would I know that?" And I said, "Because you have pizza with him all the time." And he was like, "I would never know that." And it's like, we know everything. I know who here is on estrogen and who isn't. I know how this works. And he doesn't know that Marvin is, anyway. So my job is to get everybody's stories. I tell my stories, but as an editor, it's been such a pleasure to invite people, 75 women authors, to be in every one of these books. So Joni has been in the books, Medea has been in the books. There are other people who've been in the collections, and many of them are former students, but also people who I don't know or never met, like Jane Smiley, who won the Pulitzer Prize. Jane Smiley writes for the books. I didn't invite her to be in because there's fast, funny women, and there's fierce women, and fast, fallen women. And when I was sort of embarrassed to ask her to write another time, because she's Jane Smiley, who wrote 1,000 Acres, and I, worship at her altar. And she was like, "You didn't ask me to write for the second one." And I was like, "I was afraid to." She said, "I was offended you didn't ask." I'm like, "Okay." And Caroline Levitt and Phyllis Levin, so these great American writers, and then a lot of UConn, a lot of alumni, a lot of women who had either been on the faculty, who had been a part of our community in different ways have written for the book. And I write an introduction and then a piece. So I'm going to read you from the first book. So from Fast, Funny Women. And this cover was done by Mimi Pond, who is a New York Times best-selling graphic novelist. She has a great book about her time as a waitress in Haight-Ashbury in the late 60s called Over Easy, which is such a great title, right? Working at a diner. And she did the cover, so we got Medusa, but all the women are laughing in the image. And Mimi has a great thing about fabric and cloth. But I write about what I often have my students do is to take one moment in their lives or one topic and focus, and how they can maneuver that in about 750 words. So here we go. Here's the premise. What if when we're young we could look into our future and see only the most ridiculous, awkward, and pitiful moments ahead? What would we think about ourselves then if we just saw one moment out of our future? What would our choices be? How would they be altered? If by seeing pictures, these framed moments ahead of us, how would we change what we thought about our later lives? My husband and I drove across the country. We had a safe car, audiobooks, and enough cash to stay indoors. We were ready for fun. But then there was one night in Northern California. It had rained hard all day, and driving had been tough. Windshield wipers on, difficult to see the road, some pretty intimidating fog. We were going to try to make it further, but decided around 7 o'clock on a Sunday night to call it quits. We pulled into a small city, chose a small local motel, and since the plan was to get just some serious sleep and leave the next day, it didn't seem to matter where we were going to stay. So, it was fun. The room was a little worse than usual. For starters, it had a neon orange shag rug that had seen better days as far back as, say, 1972. I thought I heard crickets from the rug and maybe Mac Davis singing "Baby, Don't Get Hooked on Me" coming from inside the rug, but I thought, nah, that's fine. The room's only attempt, and again, I don't make anything up, I don't write fiction. I can't write fiction, unlike Ellen Littman, unlike other brilliant writers here. I can't invent. I can only, gather and then put into words. So all of this, for better or worse, is actually stuff that happened. The room's only attempt at decoration consisted of 6 faded clown prints bolted to the wall. Bolted to the wall. What unnerved me was the implication that other guests had attempted to steal them. Otherwise, they would not have had to bolt them to the wall. There were twin beds covered with nylon paisley bedspreads so slippery it was nearly impossible not to slide directly off into the shag rug. Seeing the expression on my face as we walked into the room, Michael said, "I'll go get us some food." He just wanted out, right? He just wanted to leave. So the understanding, as always happened when we stopped at one of these hotels, it was a trip of a couple of weeks driving back and forth across the country, the understanding was that while he was gone, I would unpack whatever we needed, open the wine, and get out, whatever we needed to get the evening started. That was the routine. I looked around for those little plastic glasses that are usually on the shelves in bathrooms of motels, right? Sometimes they're wrapped now, so they want you to think they're hygienic. Not only were there no cups in the bathroom, there were no shelves in the bathroom. There was, however, another clown print. But there were no cups, no glasses. And I decided I needed to drink the wine nevertheless. So Michael returns to find his wife sitting on a paisley-covered bedspread, drinking, basically a paisley nylon-covered bed, drinking cheap wine directly out of the bottle. Great luck. While gazing stupefied, that's a great one, gazing stupefied at Bozo, right? I'm just sitting there looking at the clown print. In a falsely cheerful voice, Michael announces, the only thing I could get to eat was potato salad. I said, where could you get potato salad when there was no other food? How can you just return as a hunter-gatherer with potato salad? How is this? And he said, there was a deli, it was closing, and I didn't like the look of the cold cuts. I start rifling through the paper bag. I'm really trying to keep it together. I start rifling through the paper bag for napkins and cutlery. There were napkins, but no spoons, knives, or forks. Michael, I said, how are we supposed to eat this? What do you mean? There are no implements, I pointed out. In a phrase I did not at first understand, Michael said, I have a shoehorn. He looked enormously pleased with himself. Then I got it. We sat at the edge of our respective beds, passing a bottle back and forth, along with a plastic container of potato salad, as we shoveled food into our mouths with a shoehorn. Let's face it, if you had told me as a kid, honey, you're going to spend a night in a sleazy motel eating potato salad with a shoehorn, staring at a clown print in silence, would I have really worked so hard in college? I used to think I'd like to see my future. Oh, if only I could fast forward a little bit and see where I'll end up. That would give me the motivation to do well and be all that I can be. I don't know. We have to choose those snapshots carefully. None of them are representative. It's all about context. When Michael and I left the next morning, our drive took us through fields of orchids. Had we not stopped the night before, we would have driven past them in the dark. A picture might be worth 1,000 words, but you must choose your words and your pictures carefully. And you must always pack a shoehorn. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, it's about really finding that one moment. It's like finding that one thing. And it really was, and again, I couldn't make it up. But as I talk about in the introductions to the various books, I also want to be aware of the time and leave time for questions and answers, or questions at least. I don't know if I'll have the answers. But that in terms of writing, and in terms of writing humor, humor works by approaching topics that nobody else wants to touch. It embraces taboo subjects. What's taboo for women is different from what's taboo for men, and therefore women's humor exists in a different world from men's. That's why this book, this series exists. And the other reason we have to write what our lives are like is because there is no such thing as an ordinary life. There is no such thing as an ordinary life. The best comedy, like the best writing, never trivializes anything, but instead emphasizes, italicizes, and puts into bold the individual moments from which all significant stories are made. No great piece of writing, whether it's a poem by Bruce Cohen, whether it's a novel, whether it's Sean's poetry, whether it's Brenda's essays, whether it's Claire's scholarship, whether it's whatever we do, no great piece of work ever started with a general idea. It starts with something specific. It starts in a moment of thought, a recognition, a realization, an observation. It starts with something that you get. It's not like, I'm going to explain the ways of God to man. That may be how certain pieces of work start, but that was not the original idea, I bet, no matter what he said when he started the piece. So, like any good story you've never heard or read before, you'll recognize that the story behind it immediately. So for all of the pieces in these books. The audacity, the resilience, the intelligence and playfulness, a deep sense of skepticism and a deep sense of delight. They will conjure a call and response of your own. And in terms of writing all of our stories, even if we don't think of ourselves as writers, by addressing what's meaningful in life, by refusing to ignore it, dismiss it, repress it, or atone for it, writing runs towards what's frightening or shameful or worrying in our lives. Everybody has felt this way, done a version of this, gone through it, come out of it, and triumphed over it. What we do when we write at our best, whatever we're writing, is we lift the rugs that others have swept under for generations. Or maybe we're just revealing the mess that we've made ourselves. Writing it down is the opposite of covering it up. And that's what we've got to do when we write. You get your deposit back on whatever weirdness has happened. Writers know that experience is only a first draft. The future is a vault into which today's details are deposited, only to be withdrawn later on, and when examined with compassion, amusement, and curiosity, made into a story. So, if you look at the world, you will see a mirror of yourself. You'll see a mirror of your own experience. In the short pieces in these recent books, you will see a compact mirror. They're small mirrors, but they're mirrors nevertheless. And they will reflect what you're thinking as you read them. In part, they'll reflect what the writers meant, but we can never really tell what the writers meant. But what it means is there's a connection. And so in Fast Fallen Women, the most recent one, I decided to put in little descriptions so that Maggie Mitchell, who is a former student here, wrote, "Party Girl, my diary is cryptic on the subject. I have something to tell you. It's major and it's bad." Caroline Levitt, who's a New York Times bestselling novelist, wrote, "It wasn't the dancing so much that drew me, it was the dance teacher." Amy Tan, who wrote for this book, right? Amy Tan, her little takeout line is "lift your hem." It's great, okay? The woman on the motorcycle, both of us being gay and George being very gay, we kept our awareness level at alert, okay? Feeling 39, Ebony Murphy Root, another former student. "My lack of desire to be a mother often confounds people. It even angers a few." Planned Parenthood. "It was legal, it was straightforward, it wasn't easy." Catherine Jimenez, who some of you know, who is a student now, graduating. Her piece is called Rubbers. "What sin had I committed that my brother had not?" Rituals. "It's easy to be angry at what I don't have than to want it." Hysterectomy, Hysteria by another former student, Michelle Carter. "The last person to give me a pap smear was crowned most likely to yell at a crying patient." Which I think is fine. Kelly Andrews Babcock did "You Know You're a Bruce Whore When?" Because she keeps going to Bruce Springsteen concerts over and over again. The Toxic Friend. "I am not made to stand in the dark. I am meant to have my own story, not to be an ancillary character in yours." Emily Toth. "The old story about reputation lingers in our libraries and our minds." And Maggie Mitchell went to do a book club reading in Dallas. And there were 15 women in a fancy suburb of Dallas, and they read the Fallen Women. And she said it ended up that every woman in that book club wanted to tell her own story, and they ended up writing down on pieces of paper what the start of their own fallen woman story would be. And I think that's the greatest compliment, and why writers have to read and why readers should write. Because if you read something that makes you want to write, then that piece of writing has been effective. So, thank you. Questions? Don't have to applaud, ask questions. Thank you. All right. Questions, arguments, rebuttals. You know I'll call on you if there are no hands. You know that will happen. Trace.
Have you ever done stand-up comedy?
Have I ever done stand-up comedy? No. I have a 2-book minimum rather than a 2-drink minimum. When I was doing the research for, they used to call me Snow White, but I drifted, somebody had to do it. I went to a lot of comedy clubs, and a lot of the women who I got to know, like Joy Behar and Susie Espin, they were starting out as comics, and they were often, on after midnight. They would only put one, again, this was like in 87, 88, they would put one woman on the bill, because if they even had 2 women on the bill, they would consider it a girls' night for comedy. And if they put one person of color on the bill, they couldn't put another person of color, because that would be like, it's minority comedy night. That it's all straight white men were individual, right? But if there was somebody who was at all not out of, cut from that cloth, then it became, they were the spokesperson for the whole group that they represented. So that was also interesting. And it was the toughest job in the world. I've spoken I've spoken to correctional officers. I have spoken to dental hygienists. I've spoken to people who have tough jobs. I think corrections officers and dental hygienists have tough jobs. They are not paid enough for what they do. And but I'm always there to talk about communication, about humor, about whatever. But I never billed myself as a comedian. That is an art form that I can admire.
Well, you do seem to have like an expert comic timing.
That's because you get expert comic timing because if you grow up in Brooklyn, otherwise people will kill you if you don't. You will not live over age 6 if you don't have Bruce. Is that right?
Yes.
The Bronx. I mean.
The Bronx is funnier than Brooklyn.
The Bronx is funnier than Brooklyn. There we go. That's not, and not that we're competitive either, because that wouldn't happen. But yeah, there is a demand that you come back with an answer, because otherwise you're a schmuck. So you have to be able to answer. So, and I grew up with that in my family without knowing that that was not what other families did. So that when they used to call me Snow White, but I drifted. This was before the internets and all the rest of it, and I found out after several weeks that Snow White had been a national bestseller in Canada on the Globe and Mail for like 16 weeks. And I called my father, excited. I was like 31, and I called my father. I said, they used to call me Snow White, but I just like the national bestseller list in Canada. It's like number 3, and my father said, "Well, honey, it has snow in the title." He didn't hesitate. It came out of the next breath. He said, "There are very literal people." And that was, my girlfriend sent bouquets and got me teddy bears saying congratulations. He was like, "There's snow in the title." Like he had been waiting his whole life to insert that blade right in my neck. So it was not, and that was, I realized later, that was him saying, "I'm very proud of you, I love you." That's very nice. I put up on Facebook, if you're of an age where you go onto Facebook, please come onto the Facebook page, because people really do respond. So I put up, "Finish the sentence." And my 9,000 best friends on Facebook answered, and there were about 350 answers. I said, "Finish the sentence. I want to take you, ... And really about 350 respond, "I want to take you." So it's like, "On a slow boat to China, I want to take you there." People are putting up Sly and the Family Stone, "I want to take you higher." They're putting clips to different pieces of music. My brother, I have one sibling, he's 6 years older than I am. His answer, "Apart." And I was like, I started with this week's shrink appointment with that. I said, "Okay, doc, I want to take you apart." That is my brother's. "Is that your brother? Is he in therapy?" And I said, like, "Not enough, clearly, not enough. I want to take you apart." First thing, and he said, he wrote back, because I put like a question mark. He said, you said, take the first thing, say the first thing that comes to mind. And I was like, not if that's the first thing that comes to mind about your only sibling. That's not it. But it was the quick answer. So but thank you. I take it as a compliment, but no. Because if it was in a club, there'd be people throwing small cups from the back of the room. Sir?
So I did actually want to ask about timing, because on the page, that's something that's largely absent. So how do you approach making a joke or piece of humor sure to land without the gift of timing?
That's a great question. It's something that we talk about in class, because that's where you do have to do timing on the page, because you can't, in the same way that you can't have your jokes or your funny lines tread on one another when you're speaking. You have to give room to people so that they know that that's a place. They have to think about it for a second and then get it. You have to do the same thing when you're writing, so that you can either do it by real space on a page, or that there are lines that need to be on their own, the shoehorn, so that I didn't understand for a minute, like that's on its own line, so that people can get it, so that they can laugh in front of the funny part and after the funny part, because it's like, no, And then you tell them, yeah. And they're going, no. And so there has to be that sort of, again, the call and response, the back and forth. So it's not one intensely funny thing right after the other. So that if you read somebody, let's say like George Carlin, who managed to do the timing of his stand-up on the page, it is these short, sharp lines with a lot of space between them, but that's joke telling. The people who are really funny writers, like Dave Barry, very, very funny for a woman. I mean, I took it seriously. But he really manages to do that on a page. And it is by or Dave Sedaris that you work with him so that you are getting it. He's not so far in front of you. Because you're nodding and you're going, oh, I think, I gotta get, you're sort of laughing before it comes. So it can't be long blocks. It has to let your reader in. And so, like everything else, that's just learning how to do that and being aware that that has to happen. And it's visual as well as comprehensive. Good question. Hello? Jake?
Besides your family, what was your constant motivation at looking at the theories behind humor and like your interest in it?
What was my motivation of looking? It was not my family who motivated me to. They didn't want me to do that. It was the last thing they wanted me to do. They wanted me to stay out of jail and not get pregnant in high school. It's like, what did your family wish for you? That was it. After that, it was all up to me. They really didn't. Otherwise it didn't matter because nobody was going to make bail. And you think I'm kidding? That's not. That was not going to happen. I started actually, and again, I'll maybe Jake's will be the last question, and I can talk to people individually if you'd like. But I did a paper in college, and it was about. This is going to sound very hoity-toity, but it was a paper about Erasmus's In Praise of Folly. It was a book I read in a comparative literature course, and I'm not going to give you a précis of In Praise of Folly, but it's something that is about humor, but it's about redemption. It's how humor leads, like it really is about getting your money back. There's something sacred about humor. It doesn't, again, it's not the diminishment. It does allow you to be generous toward the world. It gives you really good humor, and comedy allows for compassion and connection. As opposed to a lot of the humor that we have going on now, which is just bitter and fighting and acrimonious. That's too easy, right? Why bother? You can make anybody feel bad. The gift is to make people feel better through whatever form of communication you're using, but especially through humor. So I had a teacher who, I said, let me do something in the vein of Erasmus. Let me write like Erasmus. Let me imitate it and take a topic and do it like Erasmus. And this guy, a guy named Scaldini. And he said, I know you can do that, and you get an A. I know you can do it. Do something you don't know you can do. He said, write an academic paper, write a scholarly paper on this topic, write about humor and comedy. And I was like, I don't want to do it. I'm not that smart. I don't want to do this. I was like, I'm here for comic relief. I don't think you understand why I'm at this college. That is not my role. It's not to be. There are so many smart people here. I'm not the smart one. I'm the funny one. And he said, do the paper. So I'll give you an A, but do the paper. And I did it, and I started to read about theories of comedy, and that had been around for 200 years and longer ago. And it was like, okay, I really like to do that. That it wasn't easy. That there were all of these other dynamics functioning in terms of humor and comedy. And so that was actually my first encounter with the stuff that was above my head, and I had to reach. And that was the use of all kinds of space and muscles and energy that I didn't trust myself to have, but that the good teacher knew that I could do. And for everybody who wants to be a good teacher, I think that's what we have to encourage others to do too. So what? If you're going to screw up, what's going to happen? You screw up, big deal. That's what an education is for. It's giving you space to do that. So, and that's what life is for, right? Nobody's going to ask you, like, what you got on your SATs when you drop dead. Okay? Nobody's going to ask for your GPA. Nobody's going to ask. They're going to say, did you have an opportunity for joy? Did you have the opportunity to make somebody else happy? Did you have the opportunity to bring people together? And you say, most of the time I did. They say, you're in. You're good. Or they say, there's a wait list. There are a lot of interesting people on the wait list. You know, you can amuse yourself while you're there. Okay, thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sean Frederick Forbes. Thank you, Sean Frederick Forbes, for making this possible. Thank you all for coming out. Good night.